Hey folks, in this video I'm going to show you how to make this crochet smiley face bag. To start, you'll need to make 18 of these cute smiley face granny squares. Here's a link to my tutorial for how to make these. I'm going to do half of my smileys in yellow and half in purple, so the bag will be different on both sides. You'll also need scissors, a darning needle, the same size crochet hook and the same yarn used for the border of your squares. Once you have your squares made, you need to sew them together. To do this, we're going to do a mattress stitch into the back loops of your stitches. I'll demonstrate this with the contrasting yarn so it's easier to see. On the first granny square, find the second chain of your corner and insert the needle up through this. On the second square, sew down through the corresponding chain. Tie this off into a double knot. Then insert your needle back up through the first chain you went into. Now we're ready to start. On the second granny square, find the next stitch along from where you tied your knot. Insert your needle down into the back loop of this stitch. Pull your yarn through. Then move back to the first square, find the next stitch along and sew down into the back loop of this one. Then move on to the next stitch on the second square and sew down onto this. Keep repeating this process, alternating stitching down into the back loops of both squares, almost like tying a shoe. Here I am at the end. I'll stitch down into the first chain of this corner and then down into the corresponding chain of this square. Now you'll see that I left these stitches quite loose to show you the technique. To tighten it up, I'll just hold the end where you tied your yarn on and then pull the yarn from one side. Make sure you pull it evenly so that your seam is in alignment with the square. I like to sew my squares together using this technique because it's pretty quick and it makes a lovely flat seam that's pretty invisible when you use the same colour as your square. After joining up two squares, you'll keep joining on the next two. You'll see that my yarn end is coming out of the corner chain on this second square, so I'm going to want to join it onto the square diagonally opposite. Find the second chain of this corner and then stitch down through this. Then join onto the next square with the corresponding corner chain. Then continue stitching down through the back loops of both squares like we did before. At the moment, there's only this one thread joining these squares together, but later we'll stitch up this seam here so everything will be joined up. Here is my grid of 9 squares for the front of the bag. I've sewn together along these horizontal lines, now I need to stitch up the vertical seams. We will sew up these the same as before. Stitch up through the second chain of the corner and down through the chain on the other side. Tie this off in a double knot. Then stitch down through the back loops of the stitches, alternating between the two squares. Here I've come to the section where all 4 squares join up at the corner. I want to show you how to do this part as it can be a little bit confusing. Here I'm stitching into the back loop of the last double crochet before the corner, and on this square I'm stitching just below the knot. Then I'm going into the first chain of the corner and then down through the second chain of the corner on this side. Here you'll see the yarn that was used when joining up the squares along this line. I'm going back down through this stitch and then down through the second chain on this other corner. Then I'm going to stitch this last remaining corner chain and do the same on this square. Then I'll continue on as before. I think this method of joining the squares creates a neat join that shows off the corners of the squares really nicely. So here I've completely sewn together the front and back panels of my bag. Now I'll stitch together along here and join the side to this side to make a tube. Now this is all sewn up and looking pretty bag-like. We will need to sew the bottom closed, but before that I want to add some rows of crochet to the bottom and top of this bag to make it more rectangular. Starting at the bottom on the side seam, find the stitch just before the corner. Put a slip knot on your hook and make a standing half double crochet. Yarn over, insert the hook, pull through a loop and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. To even out the join between the squares, I'm going to double crochet the next 3 stitches together. Yarn over your hook and insert into the corner, pull through a loop, yarn over and pull through the next 2 loops on the hook. You'll have 2 loops left on your hook at this point. Then we'll work into the seam between the 2 squares, just below the knot where you tied your yarn on. Yarn over, insert your hook and pull through a loop. Yarn over and pull through the next 2 loops on your hook. You'll now have 3 loops left on your hook. Then yarn over, insert your hook into the corner of the next square, pull through a loop, yarn over, pull through the next 2 loops on the hook. At this point you'll now have 4 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through all 4 of these loops. Then continue doing half double crochets. Don't forget to stitch into this one that's directly after the corner and it's easy to miss. Continue on to where the granny squares next join and I'll show you that decrease again. So here you'll half double crochet into the last stitch before the corner. Then yarn over, pull a loop through the corner, yarn over, pull through 2. You'll have 2 on the hook. Then yarn over, insert the hook into the seam and pull through a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. You'll now have 3 on the hook. Then yarn over, pull a loop through the corner, yarn over, pull through 2. You'll now have 4 stitches on your hook. Then yarn over and pull through all 4 stitches. Then continue on with half double crochets. Don't skip this first one. Continue like this all the way around. At the end of this round you'll half double crochet into the last stitch, then join with a slip stitch into the top of the standing half double crochet you did at the start of the round. Then chain 1. and half double crochet into every stitch of this round. I'll meet you at the end. At the end of this round, half double crochet into the last stitch and join with a slip stitch to the top of the half double crochet from the start of the round. Cut off a long tail of your yarn and pull this through the loop on your hook to make a slip knot. You'll be using this yarn tail to sew up the bottom of your bag, so thread it onto your darning needle. When we sewed our squares together before, we went through the back loops, but for this seam we want to stitch behind these vertical stems under the top of the stitch. Start by going under the stem on this side of the bag, then moving over to the opposite side of the bag and going under this stem. Pull these tight as you go. I'll show you that a bit closer up. So here I'm going under the stem of this stitch. Then on the other side going under this stem. You'll see this is the hole I came out of before, so I'm going to want to go back into this hole, under the stem, and then up through the next hole. Over here, I previously came out of this space, so I'll be going back in here, under the stem, and up through the next space. Pull your yarn to secure your stitches. It makes a nice and neat seam that's also quite strong. And here's my bag. I stitched 2 rows around the top of the bag in the exact same way I did at the bottom. Now the last thing to do is the straps. I'm going to use the same background colour yarn and do a simple single crochet strap. First, do a slip knot and then chain the number of stitches you want the strap's width to be, plus 1 extra stitch. I'm going to do 8 stitches here. Then turn your chains over so you can find the bumps at the back of each stitch. This is what we'll work into for the first row. Skip this first bump as this is our turning chain, and then single crochet into the second bump from the hook. Insert your hook, pull through a loop, then yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. Then single crochet into the back of these bumps until the end of the row. I'll have a total of 7 single crochets. When you get to the end, turn your work and insert your hook back into the stitch you just made. Pull through a loop, then yarn over and pull through both stitches on the hook. Then you'll single crochet till the end of the row. If you look at the stitches from above, you'll see a V shape. Make sure you go through both sides of this V when inserting your hook. Continue making single crochets into each stitch until you reach the end. This last stitch can be a little bit tricky to work into, so make sure that your needle goes through both sides of that V. After this, turn your work again and then repeat this process as many times as you need to get the strap the length you want it to be. Once you finish this one, make another strap in the exact same way. These straps will stretch a bit, so keep this in mind when deciding how wide and long you want them to be. Then figure out where you want to put your straps. Thread the tail yarn of your strap onto a needle or attach some extra yarn if your tail's not long enough. Then place your strap inside the bag and insert the needle up through the fabric. We're going to stitch between these two rows here. Skip over one of the half double crochets on the bag and insert the needle back down through the bag and the strap. Then work back up through both these layers again. Continue this until you get to the end of the strap. So after you've gone along this row, it's good to secure it further by stitching back up along the top section of the bag. Continue like this until you get to the other side of the strap. Fasten off your yarn and weave in the ends. Do the same for the other 3 strap ends. Now it's time to check out the finished product. Honestly, I think these bags are so great, and seeing all these little smileys together just makes me happy. It's a great size for everyday wear. It's a pretty quick and fun project to make, and I hope you love making your own smiley bags. Subscribe for more crafty content.